So this week on the Any Given Run Day podcast, we have a running coach with a bachelor's degree in sports science and master's in performance analysis. But you may know him as the guy who not only gives sound running advice on Instagram while running, but he somehow manages to do it so clearly and effortlessly. I couldn't even say the word effortlessly. Barry Mullin, welcome to this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. How you getting on?
Good, guys. Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
So good to have you on the show. Sean, you've said enough now. You couldn't even say effortlessly. What was it last week? Tatalon?
You try and cover it up, you messing up saying effortlessly there as well.
I did mess it up. I tried to say it like you said it.
Must be that bad connection over in Africa. It's not the Sean show. It's not the Eric show. It's the Barry show. Our guest is here, Eric. Our guest is here.
I can relate to you on that one, Sean. Let me tell you, the videos might look effortlessly, but they certainly aren't.
You did it.
Do you dub them, Barry? Do you dub them? It sounds like you just mime it, and then you go back into your, because you don't like sound out of breath at all. It sounds like you just say it confidently in front of a room, like you're in a studio saying it, and then it's just mime to what you say. You don't mime them, do you?
I don't. I wish it was that easy. It's an awful lot easier when I'm fit, I can tell you that, because I'm actually able to talk while I'm running, but sometimes it takes a lot of takes when I'm breathing heavy, particularly for a session or a long run. It can be very tough to do the video, and they're usually the runs I don't want to talk either. So a bit of practice. Some of my earlier videos were not pretty, but I'm getting there, I think.
Fair play.
Barry, where did running, I suppose, obviously we know that you give great running tips and stuff online. You have a great background in terms of an educational background in sport and education. Where did running start from you, or was it a fallout from university, or how did you get into sport?
It was a long time ago, really, and it was probably before university. I ran my first marathon when I was 19. Did the Dublin City Marathon when I was just finished sixth year. So well before I had any idea about sports science or anything really to do with running. I just took a notion, I think, when I was finishing school, and I was like, you know what, I'd like to run a marathon. That'd be cool. Needless to say, it didn't go very well. It was quite an uncomfortable experience, but I did do it again the following year because obviously, like most people, when something doesn't go your way, you want to try it again. So it was a bit more enjoyable at that stage. But that was the beginning of running, I suppose, for me. And then once I did go into college, I started to get a bit more information that was helpful, that kind of improved me a little bit. I was playing hurling at the time as well, so it was always just a side gig to the hurling. But that's the start of it. And then it is, to make a long story short, then I did take a big break in my mid-20s. One of the things that I don't really share on my Instagram is that I do have a pacemaker. So I stopped all exercise pretty much when I was like 22 for a period of 4 years. And I suppose that gave me an awful lot of time to actually research exercise. Running in particular was the focus mainly for my undergrad thesis and then my postgrad thesis. So that's where the passion came from, it, trying to get myself back into exercise. And then I kind of went on from there and been running ever since then, I suppose. I'm 31 now, so I think I got back into running seriously when I was about 26. That's the long story short.
So Barry, pacemaker, I'm just going to hold you on that one. Was that something you've had since you were a child, or was this a new fashion you decided to pick up in your 20s, or what was it?
Well, I did pick it up in my 20s, but it wasn't for the lovely scar that I have on my chest. That wasn't the reason. It was, I suppose, it's very commonly seen in sportsmen. I suppose the most obvious example would be Christian Eriksen. It's a similar type of heart condition, not necessarily where I'm at exercise that I'd be at risk, but it's the opposite. I would when I'm at rest. So when I'm sleeping or extremely relaxed as well, that's where my heart condition would affect me. So at the time, I was passing out quite a lot without explanation. So one time I pushed it a little bit too far and had to get brought back, so to speak. So that's why I got the pacemaker.
Wow.
That's why I got the pacemaker at the time. It's very dramatic at the time. It was, of course, but it's been a long time for me.
This is going to be like EastEnders. I have to ask more. Was this one of those like defibrillator moments on the pitch that tragically some people lose their lives, or was it just
Not as
What?
bad as that. Not as bad as that,
Okay.
thankfully. I was in college at the time, and it was just in a lecture. I was obviously a bit too bored, perhaps, in the lecture, or feeling
Oh wow.
feeling too relaxed anyway. And at that stage, my heart did stop briefly, and then I had a couple more episodes, obviously, in the follow-on weeks of that where they kind of investigated it, and that's when I got the pacemaker. Then on the shortest day of the year, I think, the 21st of December of that year.
Nice. Always remember that as a good one.
Yes.
And to just dive deeper into the background behind it, obviously it's because it's is it fitness induced? So you're super, super, super fit, and your rest and heart rate's obviously super low. That it now look, I could be wrong. I'm just you'll tell us as the expert in it that it just forgets to do its job because you're super fit, or what way does it work, or what's the explanation? I suppose because I've no doubt you had these questions.
Yeah, no, of course. It was more prominent in people that are fit because it is a risk of having a low heart rate. So I did have a low enough heart rate at the time, but probably a bit too low. The lowest heart rate I had recorded was in like the mid 20s while I was asleep. So
Oh wow.
it was a bit low, even though like obviously I was playing a lot of sports. So at first it can be easy to say your heart rate's low because you're extremely fit, but it was just a tad too low, and that's the reason why it came about. But it was caught, thankfully. So I was very lucky at the time.
How
Did you have?
scary is it to be faced with the prospect of heart surgery as a 22-year-old? Because
It
obviously, as we said, it's not a fashion statement. It's life saving.
exactly. It was quite scary at the time, for sure. I'd say my mom was probably more scared than I was. It happened quite quickly, so didn't really have too much time to think about it. But yeah, I was very assured that it was the right thing to do at the time, and I have been perfect ever since. So I know it has worked. So I'm very happy about that.
Would you go back to training anytime soon, or was when you were told at the time of the pacemaker, were you told fitness that's a path not to go down, and you were like no, and that's what spurred you on to what you did, or what happened after that?
Yeah, so I was very obviously active, and like I went to the gym and ran and played hurling at the time. I was told to take a good period of time off afterwards. Just you have to let it settle into your stomach, into your chest, sorry.
Yeah.
And I did finish my career in hurling at that stage. You're not recommended to play contact sports. So now to saying that, I was kind of falling out of love with hurling at the stage anyway, like most people probably when they go to college. But yeah, it was about a year when I was off any sort of really proper physical activity. And then obviously, you know yourself, if you take such a break, it can be extremely hard to get back into it. And I'd say that like obviously I had an interest in it, but the gap probably made me start running. The reason I started running was because of such a long gap from exercise. I eased back in by going to the gym, but I'd probably gained a little bit of weight. I'm not going to say it was a lot of weight, but running was obviously the first option to, I've done this before. Let's shed a few pounds and get back into running. And then but realized that why did I stop for so long? I was probably just afraid to get back into it as serious as I was. Of course, most doctors and stuff will recommend you don't do anything crazy like run marathons, but there's no risks really as long as you're relatively okay and you are checked, of course, periodically, which I still do get my pacemaker checked, so I'm all good.
So they say kind of our experiences kind of make us, and obviously your experience was, oh, I don't know if I want to take on this sports. How did your studies kind of change when you had essentially changed? Were you more focused on it? Were you more, because obviously in university it's a time to be challenged, it's a time to be educated, it's time to research. How did you change everything? I suppose your everyday life, your studies. How did you tailor finding more answers for yourself
Yeah,
about getting back into sport and the risks, obviously?
it kind of made me more interested, I suppose, in the physiology of performance. That's another tongue twister.
Well,
That's
Sean.
what that's
Absolutely not.
definitely where it guided my I suppose like my thesis and then postgrad decisions of study. And it kind of made me it definitely guided my return to running and my understanding of like knowing that you have different zones when you exercise, obviously being careful, like not to just sprint out the door too soon, that I could understand that I was able to get return to running by taking it easy, by going slow. So yeah, it definitely made me more interested to get back to running so I could be the guinea pig for all the stuff that I had been studying. That's for sure.
You're clearly very active on Instagram. This is going to be a very long-winded question. I don't even know exactly where I'm going
Go
with it.
ahead.
But your postgrad was on Zone 2. Am I right in saying something similar to Zone 2 and kind of running and that kind of
Yes.
thing? Zone 2 on Instagram could be mixed with easy running. What are your thoughts on what easy running is and what Zone 2 running is?
Yeah, so I postgrad was it was looking at zone two. It was more so focused on, say, different training intensity distributions, which obviously zone two and easy running comes into. I believe it, but I think it's open to interpretation for sure, and it does depend on the level of athlete and I'd say the time available to an athlete. There's no denying, obviously, science is science, so there's plenty of papers out there that will tell you the endless list of zone two and easy running. And I think it's one of the things that I suppose my education background and what I try to do on Instagram is decipher what easy running can then look like for the average runner, because it's going to look different for everyone. There's loads of different markers of what heart rate you should be, what lactate. I would simply say, as long as you can chat to your friend reasonably without puffing and panting, that would be zone two easy to me. And I know an awful lot of people, their heart rate might not reflect that when they start running initially. So it can be very difficult and very confusing when you see an awful lot of different statements online. But I would say to really reel it in and make it as basic as possible if you're able to chit chat while you're running.
When I go for a run, my Garmin will tell me one thing. I'm in zone 2, it might say. Strava might tell me I'm in zone 1. My
Yeah.
zone will tell me I'm in zone 4 and I'm pushing towards the max. And then people online tell me stay the hell away from zone 3 because zone 4 and 5 is working at pace. Zone 2 is easy running, and zone 3 is no man's land. Where you're getting the absolute nothing out of no one. For someone getting into running, is zone 3 all that bad? What is zone 3?
Yeah, like you summed it up brilliantly there, particularly for someone getting into running. It's the most confusing thing in the entire world. Zone three won't kill you. I think I might have said that before in a video, but people will call it like the gray zone, or as you said, no man's land. All zones are connected to each other. That's one thing that I found quite striking at a time when I was in college, and I often hear it online still, that everything is connected, just because you're in zone three, it doesn't mean you're not working a good portion of the physiology that would still be worked in zone two. So it's not really to stress the finer details, particularly, I suppose my target audience would be helping people get into running, or people who are already in running and want to improve with the time that's available to them. It can be one of the things that we're really, or the internet or maybe Instagram is very obsessed with these days, is optimization and always looking for hacks or the 1%. And it's like you can get bogged up in those things and it can really like make your head go around in circles. I've done it before. That's why I really started my sharing information, because trying to help people not to waste or lose their marbles like I did at a period of time. So it's really just to kind of make it as straightforward as possible.
We have a marathon coming up where Any Given Day crew, we're doing Barcelona marathon coming up, and some people like myself and Eric, it's 4, 5, 6, 7 marathon, whatever it is. One's 1 and 2, and our times might improve a little bit, not a lot. You in 2013 in Dublin did a 4 hour 25-minute marathon. In the 8 years, you went off, you got a degree, you got a master's, you got a pacemaker, and then somehow in 2021 you did 3 hours and 9 minutes, Barry. Is it down to the
Yeah.
pacemaker that you knocked off an hour and 16 minutes off your time? Or what is this hack, Barry, that helps you get to like nearly a sub 3 hour runner and have one of your goals now to be a sub 3 hour marathon runner? What do you attribute that to?
I think it was time and it was patience that I took when came back from running. Came back from, and I took a good 2, 3 years before I attempted the marathon again. I would I would often call that marathon my first marathon, because it was the first time I gave it a really good go in terms of training and nutrition. I did everything that what at the time that I knew was best. So it was definitely my best effort. I put in, as I said, I put in an awful lot of time. One of the things that everyone nowadays loves to rush straight to the marathon. That was a process of running and getting back to running 5-10Ks over the course of 2 to 3 years before I actually attempted the marathon again. So I had an awful lot of mileage under my belt. That's definitely one of the things that I would attest to that at that stage. I was definitely training, as I said, what I would view and what most people would probably view as the right way of, I was doing a good bit of easy, a lot of easy, some hard and some long runs, you know. It had a good mix. I was still not 100% certain, obviously, what exact training worked best for me. I think that's a process of years and years when you do, in order to figure out the exact answer to that, if you ever do. But I would attest a lot of running, definitely. Good high mileage weeks.
Sean is raging because you didn't say, yeah, Sean, get a pacemaker. You'll knock a half hour off your marathon time. You have signed
I was
up.
booking the
You have
appointment.
signed
I
up.
was in. I was in.
He's after ripping his t-shirt in half, right in his chest there. Like, stick it in. Anything for a sub 25K, Sean would do.
I go
Um,
for it.
Barry, what was, I suppose, you learn yourself, and it's something that even now, like I'm kind of late to the party with my training to this marathon, and I've kind of resorted back to what do I know works for me, what do I know works for me, and it's something you just learn over a couple of marathons, over a couple of years of doing it. Can you think now that you do these videos and you're very good at breaking it down nice and easy? From the studies and the educational side, what was one or two bits that stood out to you like, wow, I never knew that about zones. I never knew that about what that would mean for me over the course of a marathon. Is there any of those one or two nuggets that you were like in the studies going, I can't believe it's that simple and I didn't know about it?
I think one thing that I learned from studying it definitely was, I might sound like a broken record on this one, but the time it takes to make an adaptation to actually be fit enough to run at a certain pace. You often think if you go out and do a session like straight away, or a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks even, that's why haven't I getting fitter? And it's just sometimes the time it takes for a certain type of fitness to actually come into you is an awful lot longer than you think. That's what, when people talk about a marathon training block and the length of time it is, it might seem like it's an awful lot of time, and people might question, well, why would I need that long to train for one day? But it's the accumulation of week after week after week that they all build together that makes that difference. Particularly, obviously, there's a certain time frame, say 3 to 8 weeks out from a race, that they all build and compound then come race day. One of the questions an awful lot of people ask is like, oh, what should I do like the week before, the week or two before? And it's like an awful lot of that won't really affect you too much. You won't get fitter, but you might do something bad. That's definitely one thing that it took me a while to really understand. And I suppose the education background that I had helped me trust the process, because it doesn't just happen overnight. That's for certain. I wish it did.
One of the you have quote unquote biggest hacks you have for getting fit quick, talking about marathons, is the long run. The long run is your
Yes.
foundation. And you talk about 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Sorry, 2 steps forward, 1 step back in your progress in terms of distance and speed. Can you talk a little bit more about what do you mean by that when you're building towards a marathon, about 2 steps forward, 1 step back?
Yeah, so it's probably not a hack, it's not the right word to use, but
Yeah.
it definitely is the best way, or the easiest way, I would say, to gain marathon specific fitness. Like you're gonna be running for a long time for a marathon, so running for a long time in training, it's very specific to it. The 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it's kind of something that I trialed myself and with an awful lot of people that I coach, and I just find that because it's such a long time frame, you can see an awful lot of plans or training approaches, which it's this week we do, let's just say 26K, the following week it's 28, then it's 30, then it's 32. And you're constantly going up and up and up. And it just doesn't give your body that time to actually one, rest, but then adapt to the stimulus that you've been given it the past 2 or 3 weeks. So an awful lot of plans might include a down week. It's a similar type of approach, but it would be a down week for the actual long run, shortening the distance. And then sometimes what I would like to do is use that shorter distance as an opportunity to actually practice a bit of, say, marathon pace work in the shorter distance. The last thing, obviously, I would say you want to do when making changes to not just your long run, but any training plan, is adding volume and intensity at the same time. And particularly doing that in one run, it can be nearly a recipe for disaster. Sometimes some bodies are well able to handle it. I know mine isn't. Plenty of other people aren't. So that's why I would go with that approach, just to be cautious. I would say that always the best thing with your training plan is to be as cautious as you can, because like I always have, this is one thing I would always say to people, is like, you have your race time goal, but you have to make the start and finish line in order to do that. So it is best to err on the side of caution.
Myself and Sean were actually talking about, well, both of our trainings, and for me, it's been settling back in, and the frustrating feeling of trying to keep my heart rate less than 140 beats per minute. And I'm running at like an 8:30 km and walking and jogging. I can't even call it jogging. I'm just kind of shuffling, and it's just so frustrating. And then today, kind of sticking to that principle, keeping most things easy, and hoping the process over the next 6 weeks means I'll be some way fit enough, and experience will get me around the marathon in a time, whatever time it is. When it comes to the intervals and the high intensity stuff, I felt like, do you ever see when cows get put back out to the field after the long winter and they're kicking and jumping and running around? The being able to run fast, or the license, I suppose, in the week, in those 2 days I'm allowed to run fast, like, just feels so good. And I felt so energetic. How often should we be adding those kind of training sessions in to see these gains and adapt as we come? I know you said most of it should be easy, and I hope I'm sticking to the sciences and what my body knows as well. But what should we be looking for out of them kind of sessions? Because it felt amazing.
They usually do. They usually do. It's probably the one run of the week, I'd say, where you most feel like a runner, because you're moving
Yeah.
fast for the person. And on that, I'd say it probably does depend on the level or the experience of the runner. You'll get an awful lot of world-class athletes that can do 2 interval sessions and a hard long run every single week. For most people, I'd say that's probably overkill. If you have a job, a life, kids, etc., like, it's hard to recover from that. So I'd say once a week would be what I would usually go with. Again, keeping that interval session as far away from your long run as you can. I'd like to keep a minimum 2 days rest, or maybe easy days between your 2 harder sessions for the week. It just gives you plenty of time to recover. If you find your body's well able to handle it each week, after I'd do that for a consistent period of time for a couple of months, and then trial adding in an extra session 1 week, if not, and then maybe take a break, go back to 2, and then go add the third in again for another a week, just to ease in, particularly with intensity. It can always be the one that, the straw that breaks the camel's back, should I say.
Barry, I hate intervals because I suck at them, and I know to, to ease in the first few, and then, try and have a steady pace for the 8 and the 10 and stuff like that. But watching your Instagram, what are you doing? 16 by 200s, sick. I just want to puke before it, and then the other stuff, other intervals you do. When I go to an interview, I'm like, right, let's just warm up for a kilometer or something, get a few stretches in. I'll do 10 minutes, sometimes 12, Barry. And then after that, then I get the
Hey,
intervals
it's a big
over.
day.
It's a big day when I do 12. It's just like I haven't gone back to the start for a straight for it. But then I do the intervals. I get to the 8. I get the 8 one done. I may have been able to do one more, usually not. And I might do a 500-meter walk back to the house or wherever it is. I always finish near the house or something. When you do your intervals you talk about it on Instagram and you're about to do them, I've seen you've done like 3Ks and 5K warm-ups. Is this more to get volume? Is this cautious to make sure you're warmed up? What is the thinking behind that? And am I just being an idiot and not getting more? And feel free to say yes, because Eric calls me out all the time, by the way. You should be getting 3 to 5K in. Why is that?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I suppose I've stumbled upon by trial. A lot of people would do, as you said, the 10-minute warm up, and then you might start your session and you just find you don't feel good for the first 2 or 3 reps. A 5K for me seems to be when I'm fully warmed up. It's about 25, 30 minutes. To a lot of people, that's going to be an extremely long warm up, but I think you're better to do a longer warm up. And if you're going to cut some of the session, I would cut a small bit of the cool down, and then obviously just make sure you stretch and stuff later on instead. But it's definitely, you get more bang for your buck out of the session. So by being fully warmed up, you can hit the session running. The first 2 reps are not part of the warm up. Then they're quality from the get go. That's something I stumbled upon it because the club that I run with, where we do our sessions, is 5K away from my house. So I used to
I love that.
I used to run up there to start the session, and then I was doing some sessions on my own as well, and I would do them on a road just beside where I live, and I'd do a 2K warm up, and like that, the first few reps were all awful, and then I was like, I need to go back to that long warm up. So that's pretty much how it happened.
I know if me and
But
Aaron are the same
again,
boat, we drive up to that 5K, 5K to the
yeah,
day.
I'd be on Barry's back. Go on, Barry, get up there. We've got into them for none.
Sometimes the lads have offered lifts, and it's been very tempting, but the warm up definitely stands to you. And as you said, it does add a good bit of mileage to your week as well when you're able to squeeze that in. So it's nearly free
But
at that
Barry,
stage.
obviously it comes with an asterisk. It's trial and error. So for example, I
Yes.
did a 2K warm up and I felt really strong, but my fitness base is way less than where yours is. And sometimes we talk about, and a lot of guests have talked about, settling into races. And usually
Yeah.
when you've practiced going long distance, you don't really settle till 3, 4, 5K. When you just kind of relax, the body goes, okay, I see what we're doing here. And that's probably what we're talking about when you build up these years and years and years and years of experience over a longer distance. Then we're talking about warm-ups that don't seem so scary. A 3K doesn't seem so scary, you know?
That's it. Exactly. Like, an awful lot of people's running weeks might look like 5Ks. So to talk about it in as a warm up for your session might sound ridiculous to a lot of people, but it does just boil down to experience. And as you said, how long you've been running, it will take you longer to get into the flow of things. You notice that when you start to do an awful lot of your longer stuff as well. Most long runs will feel awful, for me anyway, first 8 to 10K, and then there's that period where you just forget you're running in the middle of it. But that does obviously come with experience, and then your body just clicking into the zone that it's used to from all the years of doing it.
Every time the long run is the exact same. But a few things that one thing I feel scary for me, even though myself and Eric talked about it so many times in the podcast, is running with other people, even though they're a little bit fitter than you are, and they appreciate it. I always say I appreciate, not that there's that many of them that are not as fit as me, but running with them just to I get better because it stops me even going off 100 mile an hour and I'm feeling stiff and sore afterwards. But last August, you definitely, well, not to throw assumptions, but you were running with Kenyans, so I assume they were very fit and fast. How was that experience?
It was unreal. It's probably one of my favorite places to go. That was my second time in Kenya, and both times I've absolutely loved it. Definitely makes you better running with faster people. There's no doubt about it. When you're trying to keep up with people on your long runs or even easy runs as well, as long as you keep it within reason, easy for yourself, it does push you, particularly for sessions as well, when you're, like, I wouldn't say racing others, but someone is a similar level to you, maybe, or even a time that you aspire to run to, then it can give you that extra bit of motivation to try and keep up with them in sessions. So it is something that I definitely benefit from. And I would say I'm guilty of not doing enough, is running with other people. I'm maybe a bit cautious. No one else wants to be in a video. But it's definitely something that's huge benefit. And I would recommend everyone would do it if they are training for a race, because marathon running can be lonely, particularly like 20 plus kilometers out there on your own for the weekend. So have a bit of company for someone who's at a similar level or even a little bit better, ideally, would make a huge difference. Definitely for me, anytime I've come back from Kenya, I've been a better runner for sure.
And what got you over there the first time, and what was that first training session like with them?
it made me realize, made me think that I was not a runner. That was the first thing I thought. I just remember the first 3 or 4 days just thinking to myself, what am I doing here? This is ridiculous. You don't look like you should be running. You can't run any fast whatsoever. And also, obviously you are at altitude, so that compounds how difficult it is to run in Kenya as well. But then it just kind of clicks. You're about 7 or 8 days in, and you wake up one day, and I remember it specifically. It's a very old post that I did on my Instagram at this stage, but it was like the day that I finally felt like I was a runner. And it was about the 9th day when I was in Kenya. We went and did a track session, and everything clicked. Was running paces that I would have been running at sea level and faster. Felt like my lungs just had unlimited air. So it definitely is a settling in period when you go to run in Kenya, and particularly with faster people. It really it struggles psychologically because you're being left behind. But if you keep chipping away and keep trying to keep up, then eventually you will.
I moved all the way to Mozambique, but I'm not getting any better, Barry.
I was going to Google Maps of how far is Mozambique away from Kenya, and should I be worried the next time I run with Eric?
I wouldn't reach it on my long run, that's for certain. Anyway, Barry, taken away from that, obviously you're getting closer to the 3-hour mark in terms of your long run and your marathon performance. There's been trips to Kenya, there's been this. How much of it then will come down to the mental factor as well?
I think a huge part, and I would say it's nearly overlooked. I think people can have performances that are way beyond what their training says they can do purely because of their mental attributes. I've seen runners that I look at their entire training block. I know their training history, can see their times, and then all of a sudden they run an incredible time. And some people can just do that. Some people can hang on into the hurt locker for an hour plus. I'd say I'm okay at it. It's definitely something that I would like to work on myself. Personally, I would probably rather be fit enough so that I could enjoy it and not be in that pain cave for too long. I would rather run the race that my fitness tells me I should race. And I always do say that any time I have run is you're only as fit as you are fit. So it's the time that you do deserve. So when I do break sub 3, it will be because I deserve it, and it will be a reflection on the fitness and the training that I have done at that time.
You'd want to do a training block with me and Sean. You'll find out what the hurt locker is.
That's called the warm-up, Eric.
I don't think I've ever been out of the hurt locker. I don't know what it's nice to enjoy a run. It's but yeah, it's definitely something. It's a nice way to do it, and I suppose at some point then when it comes down to that competition element or that mental side where you're like, I know I'm hurting, but I want the 3 hours today. I'm not doing it next week.
Yeah.
You know, at some point that will have to happen. Yeah.
100%. And I think you have to be close enough for it. I know I have ran, it's close, obviously 3:03, and then I ran 3:02. In my head, it's still a bit of a gap. I know in the marathon, it doesn't seem like much, but I know what it would look like to be faster than that. So it's one of those things that you often say to yourself, particularly like people are it's easy to say, oh, you'll be mentally tough. Like I won't give up on myself and I'll push. And if I'm close to do it, I will. But sometimes your body says no, your mind can always say yes. And both times when I've been close to breaking 3, I've always said that my mind really never gave up. I was always pushing and didn't give up on myself. And there's always everyone who's ran any race distance really, there's always a point in it, usually about 2/3 into it, where you're like, oh God, I couldn't be arsed keeping running at this pace. This is so hard, because your body's telling you to slow down, and you have that choice where you keep pushing, and you can sometimes push and hold on, but then your body simply will stop working at a certain point as well. You might run out of fuel, you could cramp. So all those things do come into play. So once I get the fitness and the body is right, I know it will be no problem when I am close.
Speaking of marathons and different stages and the mental approach, you talk about breaking it down into the 10-10-10 method. What is that?
Yeah, so it's probably my approach to separating it up so that it doesn't feel as daunting. Like 42K or 26 miles is huge when you think about it in one go. So it kind of break it into three intervals, so to speak. So 10, 10, 10 is 10 miles, 10 miles, and 10K. I really enjoy running 16K, which is 10 miles. So that's how I was like, you know what? It's actually just two of them, and then it's only a 10K race. So it was very simple for me to break it up that way. And like that, when you're doing intervals and you're ticking one off as you go, three is always a lovely number. You can, because the second you've done the second one, you're like, okay, I only have one left.
Mm.
Similarly, if you've done the first one, you're like, okay, well, two left. It's a nice it's a nice number, I thought in my head, and yeah, that's where it came about, and it's kind of a good pacing strategy too. First 10 miles, take it conservative, and then the middle 10 miles is kind of where I would say let your training do the talking for you. Like you'll set, as we said already, you'll settle. Most runners will settle into their rhythm at that stage. So just let yourself settle into that rhythm and let your fitness and your body run the way it's been trained to do over the course of the 16 weeks. And then obviously the last 10K is really, as we said, the mental side comes into it, but also that's where your fitness and your training will stand to your course as well. And 10K is a race distance that most of us have ran, or most of us will probably run in training as well. So all you have to do is say to yourself, it's just a 10K left, which sounds very simple.
It really is when the race begins. You did 2024 Dublin and you said the 302 there.
Yeah.
Using your 10-10-10 method, and I don't know the answer. I didn't see breakdowns and like that. Were you in that last 10 where you knew if it was on or not on, or was it different stages before then where you're like, I'm a little bit off pace? Because it's something for someone like me to go, I'm gonna try and get 2 minutes slower or 2 minutes quicker, sorry, in a marathon. But when you get down to your 3 hours and stuff like that, 2 minutes is an absolute eternity of a difference there. At what stage were you like, this is either could be on, not on, in Dublin, just gone?
Yeah, so it was on until very late, and I did know that you're going. A lot of math sums are going on in your head when you
Mm.
when you're running. When you run as much
Like
as
Rain
me
Man.
as well. Yeah, exactly. I'll be called the Rain Man of running next. But you're trying to calculate how fast do I need to run XYZ distance in order to get your finishing time. I knew I had kind of started off a bit conservative. That was my plan from previous races. That first 10 miles was slightly outside of the pace. Now, when I say slightly outside, it was 15 to 20 seconds, but
Oh wow.
they are the margins, I suppose, as well. And then the middle 10 miles, again, I had pushed it a small bit. I was slightly under pace. That was my strategy to make up a bit of time there. And then the last 10K was feeling very good, feeling very good. And then I suppose with 4K to go, was still on course for it. And just the legs started to hurt a bit too much than I would like. So I have been asked, obviously, did I blow up? I don't think I have blown up in other races, so I know that that was not a blow up. There's a big difference between slowing a tiny bit and obviously grinding to a near halt. So yeah, we ran the last 4K about 10 to 15 seconds slower than my goal pace, and that's where the 2 minutes is kind of made up of. That, and obviously anyone who's ran a marathon knows that it's not 42.2, it's usually 42.6 or 7, unfortunately. So that's the distance.
What
Yeah,
does your
especially
watch
when you're running.
say? Does your watch say you got it? Or does the watch say a lot closer? Just
I'm
out of
pretty sure
curiosity.
I'm pretty sure my Strava says I've ran under 3 twice at this stage.
Ah, that's
Ah,
heartbreaker.
But
because
I
it
always
is,
go by the official
Yeah.
time, of course.
but that doesn't account for when you're running in the crowds. You know, you're on the
Yeah,
outside of the track or the inside of the track, or you're on the running line or the outer line. So yeah, it's a
it
tough
it
one.
it's
Hey,
definitely a tough one. Like I know an awful lot of people that get caught out, like for want of a better word, when they run their first marathon that they're hitting the splits that they wanted to do and everything's going perfectly, and then they're like they get to 42.2 and it's like, well, where's the finish line? And you have to go around 2 more bends to reach it. And it's one of those things that anyone that I would coach, just say to them from the get-go, look, this is the pace required to run that time, but you do need to run slightly faster if you want to hit your goal time because of that reason. So yeah, for an awful lot of new or first time marathon runners, it's something definitely to be aware of, that there's a couple of extra corners usually at the end of a marathon.
That's why I always tell people to run in front of the balloons and try and stay in the middle, because it's usually a little bit more open. You can save
Yes.
yourself those 10, 15, 20 seconds, because if you get in behind the balloons, you're just in the mosh pit, and it's
Yeah.
wherever you are, you just stick it out. So, but it's something to consider if we're talking about seconds. Like we're talking about, say, if you're that close and you're going, look, the difference between okay, maybe I'm way off on this, but the 4:15 to a 4 hour marathon effort, all that in the scale of fitness, but when you get down to the 3 hour, it's very, very fine margins. Very, very fine. Like someone can go to a 4:15 this year. Next year they could do a 3:45 with time and effort and consistency. But as you get closer to that three, the margins are so small. So how then do you go from that level to what we see some athletes are doing now, the 2:30s, 2:22s? What's required? And I'm happy to explore for the elite side of the house. What's required from them?
I think it really, when you look at to take it to the next level, it's probably your commitment to it. Are you doing everything that you can to get that fine margin? And sometimes you have to accept that you might not be able to. When I look back at my own training, it was a perfect training block. Now I know there's extra stuff I could have done, but it would mean sacrificing other areas of your life that you might not be able to sacrifice at the time. And it simply mean like if you're working full time, if you do have a job or family, there's only so much time that you have. So it's kind of, you'll need to optimize that amount of time that you do have. And you probably have to accept then you won't run as fast, or you won't run to your maybe true potential. Not many of us will have the opportunity to be a full-time athlete. And most of us probably aren't gifted enough to warrant the opportunity anyway, but it's they get the opportunity to see what their potential is because they can fully dedicate their life to it. Now there's obviously exceptions. There's fantastic marathon runners that can run 2:30 and faster while doing all of the above. But I think just for most people, it can be quite difficult, particularly if you haven't been running long term, if you might have got into running later in life. It's one of those things that your potential will be limited by how much time you have available to put into your training as well. Other than that, it is about doing all the things that you can do in your time that you have. Make sure your nutrition is right, make sure you can sleep as much as you can, do your strength training, cross training, all that type of stuff. Again, it's time limited, but that's where the small seconds are made as well.
For you, Barry, 2023 Dublin, 3 hours, 3 minutes. A year later, 2024, you're down at 2 minutes. Am I right in saying first that 2024, that was your only marathon in Dublin that year?
That year was my only marathon yet.
You are
Yes,
now training for a marathon 14, 15 weeks from now?
correct.
Is this because you can sense the sub three and you have to get it? Or how did this marathon come about? What is this marathon?
I originally signed up to Hamburg Marathon, but I have recently got a place in the London Marathon. So I will likely be doing London. That's the goal.
Wow, nice.
So my plan is to do that. Sub 3 is very close. I wouldn't say I'm in the best shape right now. I'm doing some running and a lot of cross training as well, but it will always be my goal when I do probably toe the line for a marathon. It's been in my head for quite some time. So I think that has helped me not put too much pressure on myself now at this stage. It can, like it can be very easy to be disappointed with your race times and stuff like that. I'm very happy to run my best effort regardless of the time. If it's under 3, that's obviously a bonus. But like I said before, your time reflects how fit you are at that stage. So I would be happy regardless. And London will be a fantastic experience to do as well.
Barry, can I touch on cross training? And a lot of marathon plans, or what we're seeing in the trend, is a lot of cross training is starting to make its way into everything in Instagram, in every kind of guide to running a marathon. They all mention cross training, but no one ever says what it is. What's cross training?
Yeah, I think it can be a confusing one for a lot of people. I probably the first thing that comes to mind when people say cross training, they think that it means go to the gym. I would differentiate between strength training and cross training. For me, cross training is anything that supplements your running. So like by that I mean instead of going for an easy run, you go for an hour cycle. And then obviously strength training would be particularly for doing weights and trying to get stronger or injury prevention. The cross training one, it's definitely gotten an awful lot more popular. I think that's probably because triathlon and Ironmans and stuff like that are very trendy also, as well as marathons. It's one of the things that I definitely haven't leaned on enough in the past. As runners, we're often always the thought that comes into our head is run more running. And sometimes it's not necessarily the right thing to do because most of our bodies can't just handle running 100 miles every week. Some athletes can, and the results will be great, I'm sure, but most of our bodies will break down and will just get injured prior to that, to actually achieving that. So I do think cross training is a good way of getting in that extra aerobic stimulus. Like we said at the beginning, the zone 2, more of that will benefit your performance for the marathon. And if it will help you be able to recover between your harder runs instead of just running every day. If you were to go on the bike for an hour instead of that easy run, like I said, it would make it easier to recover, but you also would still have that hour of exercise as well. So as I said, I'm guilty of skipping it myself because I love running. I can't say I love cycling, but something that needs to be kept up for sure.
It looks into the longevity of it as well, because you look at some bigger people, myself, near 100 kilos, running the 100K has an impact on the body, versus if I take 2 of those runs and I get on the bike for an hour and a half, there's severe less impact, but yet for the same cardiovascular gain.
Absolutely. That's it. There is loads of benefits to it, but like you said, longevity is one of the main reasons that I would look to mix it up a bit more. I know that now, running's not bad for your knees, obviously. We'll get they'll clear that myth up, but but it does take its toll on your body for sure. Particularly as you said, if you might be heavier or if you have plenty of muscle in the body, it's going to be hard wearing on your joints. And so relieving that a little bit by doing cross training is for sure something that will benefit you. It's definitely something that one of the things and main reasons why I kind of bring it in and want to keep it for a long period of time is so that I can continue to run and obviously share information. If I can't run, it's very difficult for me to creatively share information about running. So it's also very important just to keep yourself running, and obviously long term as well. You know, you don't want to run 5 or 6 marathons before the age of like 30 or 35 and then not be able to run when you're in your 50s or 60s. I'd like to be able to run for the rest of my life. So I would be thinking of that as well.
Barry, when I was doing my homework on this episode, I was going through, like we said at the very start of the podcast, all your reels, you're talking so calmly as you're running through, and you're giving loads of different advices, whether it's on easy running, the long running, intervals, and all the rest. Where do you get your inspiration from? Idiots on Instagram saying something stupid? Do you get it from when you're coaching, where people ask you questions like, I've gotten this question a couple of times, I want to address this in a video? Where do you get that from? And what are some of the biggest misconceptions you maybe see from running, or you will get from coaches or from people talking to you? For example, you just talked there a second ago how running is bad for your knees, and we know it's not, and that one keeps coming up. Is there certain ones that keep coming up, and where do you get your inspiration from all your videos?
Yeah, like I suppose I first started my Instagram not because of the idiots on Instagram, but I look.
Sean.
I know running's been trendy for the past like 2 or 3 years on Instagram and TikTok, and I looked at it and just thought, can't really relate to that. Like that's not. It was a very depicted running as to be a very sexy sport, and with that, it's preached the benefits of this way of training or this cool thing and that cool thing. And like as a person who's been at the very not at the very back of a marathon pack, but closer to 5 hours and then closer to 3 hours, I kind of know that that's not exactly what it is. So that's originally why I would have started sharing information, just to kind of reassure anyone who is starting out running that, look, you don't have to be sexy while you're running. Most people aren't, so don't worry about that. And then that kind of led into sharing information that would help people, and one that was easy for people to decipher, because it can be very difficult when you read an awful lot of complex terms about running. There's plenty of different ones, and I would say if a lot of people don't have any science or sports backgrounds, it can be quite confusing. So yeah, that's kind of where I started. I wouldn't be the chattiest person, but when I do run, it's probably one of the only times that I don't shut up. So that's where it kind of came naturally to me to start making videos while I was running.
So what is it about the knees? I need to know. What's the lies? What are these lies? Because I've been told this, I don't know by how many people. Yeah, you won't be able to walk. Your knees.
It's not bad for you, but too much of anything is bad for you. That's put it that way. So too much of sitting down and not actually running and not doing any exercise is going to be bad for your knees as well. So a bit of moderation, but it's definitely not damaging to you to go for a few 5 or 10Ks each week. That's what I would say.
Someone listening to this podcast is like, that man makes sense. I like the way he approaches his intervals. I like the way he's broke down from 5 hours to 3 hours and all the rest. I want to be coached by that person. How do they get coaching from you, Barry?
Yeah, I suppose the easiest way would be to contact me on Instagram. There's a link there for my one-to-one coaching. Happy for anyone to just message me on the DMs as well, just to get further information. And that's one of the things that I have loved doing the past couple of years, is coaching people. I would say I get a variety of different clients, all the way close to 3 hours as well, but as far back as 6 hours in a marathon as well. So not that that's far back, but it just shows the different level of people that I think can benefit from a simple approach as well. And that's where the way, like you said, do like to keep it straightforward. And I think that works best for most people. And most people can get extremely far in their running journey if they do keep it simple. And one of the most important things for me, for my own running and for anyone that I coach, is that they do enjoy the process as well. And I think when you overcomplicate things, it can take that enjoyment out as well. So that's why that's what my main outcome for everyone that I coach is.
With that in mind, Barry, people may have some New Year's resolutions, and we're getting on in the year now, and they've thrown them to the wind. But as the weather gets better, people are starting to turn to running again, or there might be some groups getting up and running again. What are your basic tips? And I'm talking about those who are coming from the couch and are looking to just get out there and maybe take on a 5K, maybe take on a 10K. What's your best tips and advice for those who may be even picking up this podcast for the first time?
The first thing would be to understand that 5K is a big distance. It's very easy to look at everyone running marathons, half marathons, and think that you need to do that or rush straight to it. You need to take it very slow. Like you said, with the start of the year, we're in February now, but that can be one of the biggest mistakes that people do make, is their enthusiasm is sky high because of the start of the year, and you're rushing things and you're increasing the distances and distance every day or every time you go out. Just take it slow. Second thing, biggest thing, and I think most people would agree on this, is just forget about the pace when you're starting out. It's not a race. Go out, try and enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, you're not going to go back out the next day or the next week. So just take your time at it. If you can run with a friend, that would be brilliant. Obviously, most people won't enjoy running to start with, but you'll enjoy spending time with a friend. So it does make a big difference. And get yourself a good pair of shoes. Doesn't have to be a super shoe. Doesn't have to be worth 300 or 200 euro, but one that's comfortable and is from a running store or something like that. It just makes the process a little bit easier. You don't need all the gadgets, but you definitely do need a pair of shoes.
And if you're an accomplished podcast runner and all that, a bit of walking like I'm doing at the minute doesn't go astray as well. So
This is true.
it definitely helps in the long runs at the minute, but never be
Don't
afraid to do a
take
little bit of walking
your
in between.
breaks. That's for certain.
Barry, it's absolutely brilliant having you on. We wish you the very best over the next 16 weeks. We're interested to see if you're going to break it on Strava, but not do it on the real thing. No pressure, but we'll be watching.
I'll get my Strava PB again.
And on that note, thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast with myself, Barry, and Eric. Take care.